Coming up on Bridge City News, economic recovery was on the agenda as the Alberta Legislature resumed. The UCP outlined the government's priorities moving forward. Community support is coming in for those displaced by the Westside Lethbridge condo fires, which took place October 9th. And we hear from U.S. political correspondent Lisa Daftari, who says social media giant Twitter is going too far when it comes to meddling in the U.S. presidential election.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The municipalities of Lethbridge, Calgary, Red Deer and Wood Buffalo are calling for Alberta Premier Jason Kenney to overturn Health Minister Tyler Shandro's decision to centralize our province's EMS dispatch system. Alberta Health Services has said the changes will save the province more than $6 million a year and that response times will not be affected. The four mayors argue that they were not consulted. They say AHS is not releasing recent numbers on other centralized systems and that they believe response times will in fact suffer. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says the change to centralize will endanger lives.
I think if our MLAs and our Minister of Health and the Premier want to understand if EMS dispatch on a local basis valued, come to our communities and talk to our citizens. I think there's going to be a huge backlash against the loss of service and the degradation of service when lives matter.
The change is expected to come into effect on January the 4th. The power of community is a strong force here in Lethbridge, and that especially rings true for the victims of the October 9th Lethbridge Westside apartment fire. As Micah Quinn explains, this community has joined forces to offer help to those residents who've needed it the most.
It's been just over a week since fire engulfed an apartment building on the corner of Walsh Drive in West Lethbridge. The community of Lethbridge has banded together and given help to displaced residents of the fire.
Well, when I first heard about the fire, it was through a very close acquaintance who I've known for a few years now, who lived there. And when I found out what happened, I immediately felt compelled to help out in any way I could possibly do. So I reached out through the community support circle that I belong to here in Lethbridge. It's called the Lethbridge COVID-19 Community Support Circle.
Turner has been gathering donations, and when it was too much for him to handle, he got in touch with Streets Alive Mission.
Immediate response. People just started saying, oh, I've got this and I've got that, and you know, where can I drop off or can you pick up? And I tried to be as accommodating as possible. I picked up stuff and some people dropped it off.
Maya Robinson and her boyfriend were both displaced by the apartment fire and are currently living in a hotel. Robinson says the community support has helped her, along with the Canadian Red Cross.
The workers can only help so much. They have so many people to look after. And honestly, the community really helped me out. They gave me clothes. They gave me, honestly, some people gave me money because they saw that I was struggling, and I used it in the best of my abilities. I have a lot of mental incapabilities that I have trouble, understanding things and doing things, but I was still able to make my way through everything with the community helping me.
Robinson says she's trying to find a new home and is currently on AISH, which is assured income for the severely handicapped.
It's honestly hard because when you're looking for a place and you already have some problems with money, you're trying to save money, you got to find the right place that's under your budget.
The City of Lethbridge's Fire Prevention Bureau is currently investigating the cause of the fire. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge philanthropist Cor Van Ray has partnered with the Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southwestern Alberta to create the Cor Van Ray Endowment Fund. This means the Van Ray will be able to choose the charities that he wishes to support.
So we feel really, really privileged and proud to be able to work with Cor Van Ray with this endowment fund. Cor wants to see what he can do with the Community Foundation to support community, which is going to be fantastic because our grants programs are always oversubscribed. So to have Cor bringing in an endowment fund with extra funds is going to go a long way in our community just to help continue to improve quality of life for everyone.
In 2017, Van Ray donated $5 million as part of the Cor Van Ray Southern Alberta Agribusiness Program. Even though autumn is here, it looks more like old man winter has arrived in many parts of southwestern Alberta. Many of us woke up to a few more centimeters of snow. The Alberta Motor Association reports that 25% of the roadside assistance has been related not to those stuck in ditches, but to dead car batteries. That is up from 18% for the same period last year. The AMA recommends drivers should have their batteries tested if they're older than 3 years and replaced if necessary before extreme cold hits. Once temperatures dip below -15, it's also important for drivers to remember to plug in their vehicles. Stone Pipe Days is a celebration recognizing the pride, history, and knowledge of Lethbridge College's Indigenous community. This year it was done virtually, but it didn't lose its message. Staff and organizers stress the importance of Indigenous education, especially with the current political climate.
In Canada at the moment, you look at what's going on in the east right now with the Mi'kmaq lobster fishermen. That's, it goes to show that there's a lot more bridging of gaps that needs to be undertaken in order to ensure that both perspectives come together in a holistic way and there's reconciliation amongst the groups.
Lots of our staff are becoming Indigenous allies and really wanting to support our strategy moving forward. So if it's including Indigenous content into the curriculum and pedagogy, or if it's basically simply inviting an elder into their classroom or their team meeting to learn Indigenous ways of knowing and how to incorporate that day to day.
Over 60 people attended the online event, and RBC donated $75,000 to the school's Indigenous services through the RBC Foundation Future Launch Program. Economic recovery was the main focus of many new bills at the legislature, which resumed. Alberta Government House Leader Jason Nixon says the sitting set the stage for geothermal development, new job creation, and the reduction of more red tape. Nixon says barriers would be reduced to labor mobility in certain industries and reduce obstacles for forestry companies.
That we have fulfilled nearly 75% of our platform commitments in only 18 months. We've often said that government needs to move at the speed of business, and Alberta's government is doing just that. But there's more work to be done by diversifying our economy and attracting investment with Canada's most competitive tax environment. We're putting Albertans on a path, Alberta, I should say, on a path to generations of growth.
Opposition House Leader Heather Sweet says the NDP will focus on holding Premier Jason Kenney accountable for what she calls a self-inflicted job crisis and the chaos Kenney is creating in healthcare during the pandemic. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says he cannot rule out targeted measures to limit the spread of COVID-19 if cases get out of control. Kenney says the best way to prevent hospitals from being overwhelmed is for people to exercise personal responsibility and to follow public health guidelines. Kenney also defended his maskless appearance with federal Tory leader Erin O'Toole during an online event over the weekend. He says both he and O'Toole both wore masks before going on air, had their temperature taken, and were seated 2 meters apart. O'Toole has recovered from the coronavirus after testing positive a month ago. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Anshaw, says there are currently 116 Albertans in hospital with the novel coronavirus. 16 are in intensive care. More than 13,000 tests were completed over the past 24 hours, with 323 new cases of COVID-19. There was also 1 new death from the virus. Hinshaw also says there are active alerts or outbreaks in around 8% of Alberta schools for a total of 512 cases.
There are 96 schools on outbreak, including 26 that are on the watch list, with 5 or more cases. Health and school officials are acting swiftly every time an outbreak is declared or an infectious case is identified. That is a key reason why, to date, we have seen in-school transmission in only 69 schools, including 44 of those that had only 1 new case as a result.
The province says in total there are currently 3,203 active COVID-19 cases, with a large portion in the Edmonton zone at 1,607. There are currently 1,043 in the Calgary zone and 704 in the Central zone. Here in the South Zone, there are 199 active COVID-19 cases, including 142 here in Lethbridge. That's an increase of 8 over the past 24 hours. Lethbridge County went from 25 down to 20 active cases. Alberta Health Services says outbreaks continue at Lethbridge Family Services and Extended Care Fairmont Park in Lethbridge. Other facilities affected include Cavendish Farms, Children's House Childcare Society, and Meridian Manufacturing, both in the city. The Colehurst Good News Centre and ROC Christian Ministries in Coaldale were also affected with an outbreak. Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, there were 44 new coronavirus cases today. Health officials say the increase is being fueled by private and public gatherings, including a church gospel event in Prince Albert, connected to 86 cases in 17 communities. 25 cases in the Saskatoon region are connected to nightclubs and bars. Saskatchewan Party leader Scott Moe says his province can use targeted measures if needed to get the spread under control instead of returning to widespread lockdowns. There are just over 400 active coronavirus cases in Saskatchewan. The province of Manitoba is reporting 110 new cases of the novel coronavirus. The decline follows a peak of 173 cases last week and comes after earlier closing times were imposed on bars and restaurants in Winnipeg. Further restrictions took effect, forcing bars and casinos in the region to close and lounges and restaurants to operate at half capacity. Manitoba also reported 2 more deaths of residents at a Winnipeg personal care home, bringing the total number of the province to 42. There are just over 1,700 active cases in the province. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says a motion he is putting up in the House of Commons to set up a special COVID-19 committee will be amended to try and quash the Liberals' threat of an election.
Today, I will be introducing the Conservative Opposition Day motion. We are proposing to establish a committee to look into the various ethical problems the government has in the handing out of COVID-19 contracts to close friends and family members. It is a committee that will examine the misuse of taxpayer dollars during the worst crisis most Canadians have experienced in their lifetime. Canadians were worried about their future during the pandemic. The Liberals were worried about their friends. The Liberal government's COVID-19 response has been plagued with ethical lapses, and these are the ones we know about. The Prime Minister's decision to prorogue Parliament to avoid the growing number of unanswered questions has proven that this committee is needed now more than ever for parliamentary accountability.
Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez says the Conservatives are going too far with their motion to create an anti-corruption committee to investigate the We Charity scandal. He says it would suggest a lack of confidence in the government.
Their motion, which calls for the creation of this party, of this committee that they call the Anti-Corruption Committee, and then they put everything in there that the government is doing or trying to do to help Canadians, is clearly an indication that there's no confidence in what the government is doing. That's the first thing. The second thing is that by voting this motion, then you're asking the government to concentrate all their efforts on what is requested by this committee instead of fighting the pandemic, instead of being there for all Canadians.
The House of Commons has unanimously approved in principle a bill that would require judges to commit to training in sexual assault law. The Liberals say their proposed legislation, originally put forth by former interim Tory leader Rona Ambrose, is critical to ensuring confidence in the justice system.
This bill, Bill C3, is deeply important to survivors of sexual assault and gender-based violence. It is a small but significant step forward for them and for us all. We've had this debate over and over again in the House of Commons. Advocates and survivors have shared these stories for decades upon decades. I thank my colleagues in the House of Commons for their thoughtful debate on the matter, and I'm hopeful that we will get cross-party support to move this forward.
South of the border, recent polls show there are fewer on-the-fence voters this year than during the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Both the Donald Trump and Joe Biden campaigns believe it can still win over numbers that matter in close battleground states.
What we do know is that there's a historically small slice of undecided voters. We see sort of a hardening of where things are. Former Vice President Biden in an apparent clear lead. So it's very late for President Trump to try to change the trajectory of the race. We don't see a lot of new arguments coming from him, and we see an electorate that seems baked in and seems to be looking at this as the incumbent-driven race that it is. He owns the state of the nation, which is in the midst of a pandemic that is not going away. We do have the economic fallout of that pandemic. There's the continued civil unrest. There are all of these things cascading on an incumbent who is much more naturally attuned as a politician to running as an outsider, not having to own the status quo.
The Biden camp, meanwhile, is facing criticism over its connections with big tech after both Facebook and Twitter censored a story from the New York Post detailing alleged corrupt business dealings by Biden's son Hunter. U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftori has the details.
It's not the job of these social media platforms to censor the information they want out. Now, obviously, we don't have a vetting system on social media. Anyone can post anything, but that goes across the board. It shouldn't be that one side gets a leg up by the social media platforms with the message from the other side being silenced.
Lisa will also discuss how tensions between Washington and Iran are rising after the UN arms embargo on Tehran expired. That is coming up after business news. A wildfire located in northern Colorado has burned around 20 square kilometers and destroyed at least 26 homes. Close to 3,000 people have been told to evacuate.
We're just kind of checking out to see where the burn is. We are in Crestview Estates, which is this hill right here. We live right here. So this was the burn radius. If it had jumped Left-Hand Canyon, it would have come straight up into our neighborhood. They're doing the best they can and doing everything they can to keep our community safe. COVID, so you can't really go anywhere, and now, but you can't go home.
A new pro-life film is out called Order of Rights. Now, the story centers around Emma Stein, a pregnant single girl who has been advised by her mother to have an abortion. The film's director, Jim Ball, says another aspect of creating a pro-life movie such as this was to show the potential father's perspective in the process.
This film deals with the father's rights in this issue as well. And a lot of times the men have been kind of pushed to the side saying you don't have a right to talk about this because you're not the one bearing children. And of course, I've dealt with a lot of people over the years as a priest, and ministry who have had abortions and know that it's not just affected, of course, the baby, but also the mother, but also the father.
Catch the full interview with Jim Ball, director of the film Order of Rights, and Jeanette Roche coming up in the second half of our program. A special mural honoring the late actor Chadwick Boseman has been unveiled at Disneyland. Boseman died of cancer in August at the tender age of 43. The artist who created the work of art for the Black Panther star says Boseman was like a beacon for many.
Chadwick was like a beacon. Like he was shining light, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The day after he died, I was like, I had to create some sort of tribute that speaks to, his life and what he stood for. Having parents, many parents who, went through that same struggle with their children, some parents who lost their children to cancer, writing me and saying like, you drew my son. Like that's my son with Chadwick right there. It's so cool now to see, little kids run up to the mural at Disneyland and do the salute, and that it's so beautiful.
It certainly is a beautiful work of art. Some people would say all of the snow we've received recently is beautiful. That is until you have to shovel it. More flurries are on the way. The complete look at the weather picture is coming up. The roads in many regions of southwestern Alberta are very slippery right now. Please take care. We received another 2 centimeters of the white stuff over the past 24 hours. Jeanette Roche is here now with a look at the long-range weather forecast. And Jeanette, even though it's fall, it'll feel more like winter for much of the week.
Yeah, and here I thought it was October. Aren't we supposed to be seeing pretty leaves instead of snow this time of year? It's not even Halloween yet. I feel a little bit gypped. Flurries beginning again this evening, overnight low tonight, -8. With that wind chill, though, it could feel more like -13. Snow into tomorrow, Wednesday, we could see up to 5 centimeters of the white stuff. The high tomorrow, -2. -13 is the overnight low tomorrow evening. Again, it could feel a little bit chillier with that wind chill. Now look at all these minuses here. We are definitely lower than the average expected temperature for this time of year. -7, the expected high on Thursday with a mix of sun and cloud. Snow expected for Friday and Saturday. -11 the highs there for Friday. -10 for Saturday, -3 on Sunday, and then we're going to rise up to 3 degrees on Monday with a mix of sun and cloud. So let's take a look at what the almanac is telling us. They're telling us that the average for this time of year should be 13 degrees. We are nowhere near that. We're even lower than the average lows. The high temperature on this day was back in 1940. It was 26 degrees. -11 was the low temperature in 1984. Our sun rose this morning at 8:01 a.m. and the sun set this evening evening, 6:31 p.m., giving us exactly 10 hours and 30 minutes of daylight today. So let's take a look at what's happening across the country for the highs for tomorrow. We can see a little bit wet, soggy conditions on the west coast, Victoria and Vancouver, high of 12 degrees, high of -3 in both Edmonton and Calgary, with snow across Alberta tomorrow. A little bit same thing for the rest of the prairies as we see snow definitely in Winnipeg, high of 1 degree. Lots of sunshine in Regina, -2 the high. It's going to feel more like -18 though with that wind chill. Same thing for Saskatoon, -2. Could feel more like around -18 or 19 with that wind chill. And as we take a look further east here, we're seeing precipitation in the form of rain, because look at these temperatures. 16 the high in Toronto, 17 the high in Ottawa, and 19 the high for Montreal. Montreal could see some heavy rains tomorrow, up to 15 to 25 centimeters, and risk of thunderstorms in both Toronto and Ottawa, by the way. We could see showers here in Fredericton, 12 degrees the high. Same thing for Charlottetown. Halifax high, 14 degrees. Could see periods of rain. And we have a 60% chance of showers happening tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 15 degrees. There you go. That is your weather.
The Alberta government announced a 3-year moratorium on property taxes for new oil wells, pipelines, and new equipment. The province is also lowering assessments for less productive oil and gas wells and maintaining lowered assessments for shallow gas wells. The province says the move is a compromise that will prevent municipal taxes from harming the energy sector. But the group of rural municipalities Alberta says it received no assurances the $173 million in outstanding tax bills will be paid for, or that new lower tax rates will be honored. CP Railway is reporting lower than expected third quarter results. The company says the profit was down just over 3% to $598 million, while revenue also declined from $1.98 to $1.86 billion. On an adjusted basis, the railway says it earned $4.12 per diluted share, which is down from $4.61 a year earlier. In its long-term outlook, CP Rail says it expects a low single-digit decline in revenue this year and middle to single-digit growth in adjusted diluted earnings per share. Laurentian Bank of Canada has become the first major bank in our country to name a woman as its president and CEO. The Montreal-based bank says Rania Llewellyn will take over from interim CEO Stéphane Therrien at the end of the month. Therrien had been serving in the role since the end of June when François Desjardins retired from the top job. Llewellyn joins Laurentian after a 26-year career at Scotiabank, where she most recently served as Executive Vice President of Global Business Payments. The U.S. Justice Department is suing Google for antitrust violations. The lawsuit alleges Google abused its dominance in online search and advertising to stifle competition and harm consumers. Google has denied the claims of unfair competition and argues its businesses are useful and beneficial to consumers. The suit could be an opening salvo ahead of other U.S. government antitrust actions, given ongoing investigations of major tech companies such as Amazon, Apple, and Facebook. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down almost a point today to 16,273. The Dow was up 113 points to 28,308. The S&P 500 was up 16 points to 3443, and the Nasdaq was up 37 points to 11,516. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 63 cents to 41.46 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to 2.91. Gold was down 45 cents to 19.0649 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 24.63 US an ounce. Wheat is at $265 per metric ton, barley's at $262, canola's at $5.36, and corn is at $272 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 30 cents to 105.45, feeder cattle were up 70 cents to 130.78, and lean hogs were down 2.18 to 69.25. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 76.17 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, economic recovery was the focus of many new bills at the legislature, which resumed. Alberta Government House Leader Jason Nixon says the sitting sets the stage for geothermal development, new job creation, and the reduction of more red tape. Nixon says barriers would be reduced to labor mobility in certain industries and as well reduce obstacles for forestry companies. A new pro-life movie is out called Order of Rights. Coming up, Jeanette Rocher chats with the film's director about how this movie offers a different perspective or the father's perspective when it comes to the issue of abortion? That Q&A is on deck. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Something new for anime fans. Every weekend, Nikayuko Japanese Garden is hosting an Anime Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Watch videos on anime creation in the pavilion and learn fun trivia about your favorite anime characters. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. The Juno Beach Centre is Canada's only museum in Normandy dedicated to honoring the contributions of 1.1 million men and women who served during World War II. This year, support a worthy cause and take part in the Remembrance Day races being held until November 28th. You can register for one of 3 virtual race distances, each with its own special meaning. Participants will receive a race kit that includes a commemorative medal, a Juno Beach collector coin, a bracelet, and more. For details and to register, visit junobeach.org. Get to know your city and take part in the Lethbridge Scavenger Hunt. Download the Let's Roam Scavenger Hunt app, lace up your walking shoes, and head out with family to discover the best landmarks in Lethbridge. Put your navigation skills to the test while enjoying the journey at your own pace. No reservations, no tour guides, and fun for all ages. Visit letsroam.com/scavenger hunt. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
You really like him, don't you?
Yeah. Let's just skip. This girl's a genius.
I'm counting on you to keep these guys focused. And I don't want to hear anything about girls and parties.
Would you like to stay?
I think that I should.
Even if it's just for a moment.
Oh, God.
Where do I go from here?
I really messed up. No matter what decision Emma makes, your life will have been affected. You might have to forego playing college football.
Don't let him tell you what to do. This is your decision.
Maybe we should think about getting married.
There is another choice.
It's a baby, Em.
And you said you would support me.
I do support you, but I can't condone murder.
Don't you tell me what I can and can't do with my body.
With the American presidential election looming, the debate over abortion and the right to life is heating up south of the border and is also getting a lot of attention here in Canada. Today's guest is Jim Ball, the director and co-writer of the Order of Rights film. He joins me now via Skype from Westminster, Maryland, where he lives. Welcome to the show, Jim. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit about your background and how this story came about.
Well, my background is I grew up Catholic. My dad was the first pro-life advocate I ever knew, and I thought he was crazy at the time. I ran away from the church for a number of years. I was a musician, had a recording studio, a film production company, and then I got converted in 1992. And I became a priest when I went to the pro-life march, and someone walked up to me and asked me if I was a priest, and I'd been thinking about it. So I gave up everything that I was doing, film, music, recording studio, and stuff like that. Went to seminary, but a few years later, I started thinking about making films again. But instead of making secular films, I made faith-based films. That's the short story.
That's the short story. Yeah, just like that. You just gave up all your life and became a priest.
Yeah.
So did your personal beliefs influence your decision to participate in this film that addresses such a controversial issue?
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, I wrote the film based on a series of sermon that I preach usually about once a year on the 4th of July, which is Independence Day in our country. And I always talk about how the preamble to the Declaration has a phrase, the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which I say is not just a nice alliterative phrase, but it's the actual way that you determine how rights are determined. And people said to me, I never knew that before. I'm pro-life, but I didn't understand that. And so I figured, how do I make a movie based on a sermon without being preachy and didactic? So I thought, well, let's make it a courtroom drama.
Interesting. Okay, so why another pro-life film? So what's different about this one?
Well, we've seen a number of good pro-life films. This one basically deals with a couple things. One is the philosophical and theological moral framework, which is how we do our jurisprudence, our law here. And so it has the reasoning and rationale behind it, of course, in a script that is a story, but at the same time, it has information that a lot of people have never heard, including people who are pro-life and or Christians. Second is a lot of people really point out that this film deals with the father's rights in this issue as well. And a lot of times the men have been kind of pushed to the side saying, you don't have a right to talk about this because you're not the one bearing children. And of course, I've dealt with a lot of people over the years as a priest, and ministry who have had abortions and know that it's not just affected, of course, the baby, but also the mother, but also the father. The fathers go through a lot of guilt, and there's a lot of wounding there that needs to be healed. So, and since I'm a man, I wrote it from a male perspective in that way.
Wow, are you getting a lot more sort of male audience because of it, or sort of people saying, hey, I never thought of it that way, or anything like that?
We have. One of our people showed just the trailer at a convocation at Liberty University in Virginia. And he said a young man walked up to him and was just weeping. He was a Christian. He said, but this was my story. Just seeing the trailer let me, he said he just got touched by it. So they ended up praying for him for like half an hour or something like that.
Oh.
So we believe that, it certainly, it doesn't just affect the baby, it affects the parents, it even has a spiritual effect on the children, other children as well at times. We've had people that were dealing with stuff, we prayed for them and did like a ministry to them, and children were set free of things. So we understand that there's a lot of spiritual implication in this as well.
Interesting. Now, can you discuss the relevance of the film today?
Well, we couldn't have put it out at a more interesting time. In our country right now, we have a Supreme Court justice who's been nominated, who is a devout Catholic. She has 7 children, 2 of them are adopted, and she's been put up as a Supreme Court justice, and she is completely on the other side of moral issues as her predecessor was. And so there's a lot of fight and warfare going on over that. And so it couldn't be timed better as far as what's going on. There really is divide in our country. I told you off screen that I live about 15 miles south of Gettysburg, and Gettysburg was the site of, one of the sites of the Civil War in the 1800s. What the main moral issue was, human rights issue was slavery. And I believe the main human rights issue today is abortion, because a child is being deprived of its right to life. And so we're in the middle of a significant historical time, in my opinion.
Interesting. Now, as you mentioned, the American Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett has the pro-choice movement concerned, right? So do you think that there's a reason for concern? The Supreme Court justice only upholds the law and doesn't actually change laws. So are people thinking that she's going to have some sort of influence over changing the laws on Roe v. Wade? What's your perspective as to where America is headed on all of this?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out one thing. Roe v. Wade could be overturned. If it's overturned, that does not eliminate abortion in our country. Basically, what could happen is it goes back to the states. But she is an originalist. She believes in interpreting the Constitution as it was written and intended to be understood. And so a lot of people on the other side believe that the law you should manipulate it to achieve goals. And so she certainly is a threat to her opposition. There's no question about that. Will she hear another court case on Roe v. Wade? We don't know. But she certainly is not someone who's going to do what we call judicial activism. In other words, try to change laws from the bench.
Yeah, COVID is affecting everything and every aspect of every life, isn't it? It's just crazy. Okay, so why is sanctity of life such an important issue to you?
Well, first off, I'm a Christian, And I believe that man is made in the image and likeness of God, and I believe that the value of human life is the first order of rights. For instance, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. The Declaration says that those are God-given. They're not given by government. Those rights are given by God, and government's job is to protect those rights, not to convey those rights, if you will. So life is the preeminent right. And so basically in other words, my right to pursuit of happiness, which might be my way of life. Okay, I'm allowed to pick the job I want. I'm allowed to, pick my career. But I can't do something that interferes with another superior right. For instance, in the slavery, in the abolition movement, basically the argument was that slaves weren't fully human, and therefore the slave owners could exercise their right to pursuit of happiness because they weren't subjecting another human being, taking away their rights. Well, of course, the argument was that slaves were fully human beings. The same thing started in this country with babies, saying it's not really a person in the womb, and therefore the mother's right to choose, which comes under pursuit of happiness, she can choose to have an abortion. Our argument is certainly you can choose to do what you want with your life, but you cannot take away a child's right to live because it suits you, even if it's inconvenient. We understand there are lots of tragic things that happen, but I also know many people that are conceived and raped that did not get aborted, and they're valuable human beings. Even though their beginning was not great, they would tell you, I am awfully glad that my mother chose to keep me. So we believe that God, the image of God is in man. I have no right to murder another human being, kill them, and it is murder. Now, we don't, just so you know, in this film, we put forth the pro-choice arguments exactly the way they're made. We do not treat them unkindly. I have friends that are pro-choice that I love. I disagree with them, but I don't think they're evil, even though I think this is a moral evil. So we did not want to convey them, just make them evil people, and just write a kind of, just make a straw man. We wrote what they actually say, but we also wrote what our position is, and at least when people see it, they can't unhear the argument.
What was the most difficult aspect of this film for you?
Every part. We've had spiritual warfare going on with this almost every phase of the way. As soon as we started we did a kickoff banquet for some people who were giving some money for it. I got drastically sick for about 2 months straight. It was like COVID for 2 months. I couldn't stop coughing, and I was exhausted. When we started shooting, I had 3 cameras break down, which they never break down. They just stopped working. Step by step, it's been like that. People getting sick in unusual ways. I don't think that everything bad happens is warfare, but I also know when there is spiritual warfare.
Interesting. So what did you learn from this movie that surprised you?
That's a good question. I've been involved in the pro-life movement as a priest. I'm in the Charismatic Episcopal Church, which was formed in the pro-life movement. I've been down to Washington, D.C. and prayed almost every year before the Supreme Court. And when we're praying there, we're praying, and there are protesters protesting us who are shouting, all kinds of vile things. They'll assault us physically. So we're not unaware of the warfare aspect of it. But with that said, making the movie, it was sort of another layer. I've done exorcisms. I've done a lot of stuff like that before, but seeing a level of malevolence in the spiritual realm is it's a little. It actually surprised me because I thought I would know what it was like, and it got even harder than I thought.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating. So, Jim, what do you want the audience to take away from this film?
Well, for those who are pro-life, I want them to. A lot of them have never had a good way to argue their position. So I want to at least arm them with that. But I'm hoping to reach the people in the middle. There are a lot of people that are not pro-choice or not pro-life. They'd rather not think about it. And I think that's where the battle is always. The people just do their jobs. They're decent people. They don't want to think about moral or political issues. But I would hope that a lot of them would look at this and say, actually, I need to be involved in this. Every great movement had its, for instance, the abolition movement wasn't that big, but the people were determined. You know, there were people that were pro-slavery and were abolitionists. There were a lot of people in the middle that just sort of wanted to live their lives. So we're hoping to reach a lot of people in the middle. And then there's some people that are, like I said, I have a friend of mine that I hope she watches it, because she disagrees with me on the issue, but I think she would watch it and hopefully it would touch her heart in some way.
And finally, Jim, how and where can people watch the movie?
They can watch it or rent it or buy it on Amazon Prime, on iTunes, on Google Play / YouTube, and on Vudu.
All right. And there's a website too, right? orderofrightsmovie.com.
That's exactly right.
Is there a link there to it as well, or a trailer?
There's a trailer on there on orderofrightsmovie.com, and there are also the icons of the different platforms. If you press on the Amazon button, it'll take you right to the site and to the movie itself.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we are about out of time here, but Jim Ball, director and co-writer of the Order of Rights film, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure.
And thank you for having me.
The COVID-19 pandemic continues worldwide. There have now been over 1 million deaths attributed to the virus. And in the United States, which was hit hard, 220,000 people have died now from the novel coronavirus. Many business owners have not survived the virus and had to shut down permanently across North America. To discuss this in more detail is U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari joining me once again from L.A. Lisa, Speaker Nancy Pelosi has given the White House a 48-hour deadline for a coronavirus stimulus deal.
Yes, she's somewhat eager, she says, to push this forward. And she says this is the last opportunity, whether we push this forward before the election or we'll have to wait afterwards. So everyone's waiting with bated breath to see if this next stimulus is announced. Obviously, the markets will tank here. I know a lot of people are extremely eager and nervous about that. And depending on the news and depending on whether or not the administration and the Democrats can come to some sort of compromise, we'll see if there will be a stimulus announced.
Lisa, the Biden campaign is facing more criticism over its connections with big tech after both Facebook and Twitter censored a story from the New York Post detailing allegedly corrupt business deals by Biden's son, Hunter. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, Hal, it's no surprise that the mainstream media here in the United States has inserted itself once again, whether they take the side of the Democratic nominee Joe Biden or they silence the message coming out of the Trump White House. In this case, it was covering up for and hiding potential important emails that were relating to Joe Biden's son working and receiving a lot of money from China and getting political favors, making a large salary. And anyway, this is important information that many people were speculating about. And here we have a laptop full of emails, and the New York Post covers the story. And of course, Twitter basically blocks the tweet from going out from anybody's account. So basically, they silence the story. Again, 2 days after this incident, it was a White House advisor who's specializing on the coronavirus came out and said masks may not be effective, and his message was blocked. So it's not the job of these social media platforms to censor the information they want out. Now, obviously, we don't have a vetting system on social media. Anyone can post anything, but that goes across the board. It shouldn't be that one side gets a leg up by the social media platforms with the message from the other side being silent. So this has had a huge backlash here in the United States with those who are professional and are nonpartisan understand the damaging effects, regardless of whether it was your side or not your side. This is awful, and it is awful for our country, for our democracy, and of course for social media, for people taking social media seriously as a media platform.
A United Nations arms embargo on Iran that barred it from purchasing foreign weapons like tanks and fighter jets expired over the weekend. So Lisa, what does this really mean for us here in the Western world?
Right. So everyone had their eyes on the October 18th expiration of the arms embargo. These are embargoes that were put on Iran from the UN, banning them from acquiring more weapons. And now, what does this mean? Well, it means that Iran is free to go on a shopping spree and to beef up its military arsenal to what it was even before the revolution. So we're talking about the highest that it's ever been, at the highest capacity that it's ever been. Now, remember, the Obama administration gave all that money to the mullahs of Iran. They have the money. They obviously have the intention. So what will they do? They will go after buying weapons, and there are state actors who will sell them those weapons, obviously, to make the deal. This is one of the other reasons why we see the Europeans being so hesitant to sanction the Iranians, to be on board with marginalizing the Iranian regime and to minimize their capability. So the US has again threatened to sanction the sectors of the regime that relate to military and nuclear enhancement, hoping to at least curb or minimize what can happen after this embargo has expired.
Meanwhile, in Iran, officials there are celebrating the lifting of the UN embargo on their military. Now, Lisa, I guess that's good news for Russia and China, who will most likely offer arms to Tehran, and not good news for smugglers.
Exactly right. So this is a huge economic opportunity. So actors like China and like Russia and others are looking at this like, okay, tick tock, when is this going to expire? We're ready to offer, our large menu of options to the Iranian regime. Of course, they're celebrating this. And because the US withdrew from the nuclear deal, this is yet again another slap in the face, another way for them to flex their muscles, so to speak, and to say, look, we can go forward and we will go forward.
Let's circle back to sanctions for just a moment here. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says even though the embargo has expired, the U.S. will in fact slap sanctions on any country that assists Iran with their weapons program, a move that will likely cause a lot of tensions between Washington and Tehran. But Lisa, aren't there already tensions there now?
Exactly. And I think that has been the foreign policy strategy of the Trump White House. It has been, we're not afraid of angering our enemies because they are our enemies. This is a huge pivot from the Obama foreign policy, which was all about appeasement and apologies. And they're our enemies. So we're just going to walk away from the situation and let them do what they need to do for fear of them being mad at us or, of them not being pleased with President Obama. This is extremely important in foreign policy to say that if you want to be the leader of the Western world, the United States wants to carry that title, well, then they need to create order in that world. And in order to do that with the Iranian regime right now is to punish all of the other actors that will enable the Iranian regime, that will sell them weapons, that will do business with them, that will go around and circumvent international sanctions. It's extremely important that the United States not only take a firm position, but that they reinstate this position, and they are, extremely serious about this position, not allowing these, whether it's in the United States or outside the United States, to allow businesses to go forward and to do business with the Iranian regime.
Let's talk about what happened in France recently. A suspect who was shot dead by police after the gruesome beheading of a history teacher in an attack near Paris turned out to be an 18-year-old Moscow-born Chechen refugee. Lisa, police ended up arresting 9 suspects, including the teenager's grandfather, parents, and 17-year-old brother.
Yeah, talk about a family terror network. There has been, first of all, this story is so gruesome. It's so incredibly gruesome. Just when you thought you heard it all in 2020, it's incredible because I know that every country is dealing with its own coronavirus crises and the economic fallout from the pandemic and all of that. And we've become almost immune to hearing and to reacting to terrorism. But when you read about the details of this story, a history teacher just presenting cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, and then having this network of individuals contact each other, have this guy come and literally slit his throat. He beheaded a teacher. And again, as you said, the network or the connection of these other individuals, the entities that were supporting this act, French officials have said that over 200 individuals may be deported from France as a result of this one incident. It goes to the point of France having maybe some buyer's remorse over buying into such a uh, lax and free for all type of immigration policy for so many years, having these radicals live within their population to have an event like this take place. I mean, it's horrific. I've been covering, terrorism for years, but when I read this story and the details of it, it is so, so, so brutal and horrific. And, my heart goes out to the students of that teacher, his family, et cetera. And I hope that, they can really bring justice about in this case.
Absolutely. Our heart goes out to the families indeed. Now, since this incident, France is moving forward with expelling 231 radicalized foreigners after the assassination of that teacher.
Right, and it's so important that they move forward and make it, both a symbolic, kind of move, and also to root out this network of terrorists. I mean, if over 200 people are connected to or related to this terror network, I mean, imagine the damage that they can do. It takes one of these so-called lone wolf, and we don't call them lone wolf really, right? We've talked about this a lot on your program, where he's not alone if he's got more than 200 people in his terror network. But it just goes to say, look at how many enemies are living within one's country, and it's very, very, very prudent of the French government to take this action.
China, which is currently detaining Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, is now threatening to detain U.S. nationals due to the Justice Department's prosecution of Chinese military-affiliated scholars, a story that was first reported by the Wall Street Journal.
Yes, so this is a little more of that tit for tat by China, and saying, if you're going to go after our scholars and you're going to go after people who we send over, basically our spies, we're going to do the same to you. The message went out a long time ago for any Western individuals living in China to get out. That's to say, if they're working for the government, or if they're working for think tanks, if they're working, in different various human rights endeavors, that they not stay there because it's not safe for them. But of course, they still exist and they're still there. And this is China, exerting itself. Every step that the United States has taken has been met with an equal, response. And this is China saying, we'll do the same back to you.
It was a big moment last weekend as Israel and Bahrain formally declared that they've made a peace deal and established formal diplomatic relations. Lisa, this is only the fourth such agreement between the Jewish state and an Arab nation.
Yes, this is wonderful. This is what I call the real Arab Spring. And I call it that because it's Arab nations waking up to the fact that they can have a future. They don't have to be bound by or held back by the myth that peace has to come out between the Palestinians and the Israelis for them to go forward as a region. It incentivizes peace. It incentivizes business dealings. It incentivizes tourism. It's only good. It's a wake up call. And why do I call it the Arab Spring? It's because when we had the Arab Spring, we said the young people in these Arab nations want more. They want a future. They want access. They're educated. They have that smartphone that tells them that the world is a smaller place than that they've been told. And now they have access to all of that. They can have Israeli apps. They can have cell phones. They can have access to perhaps the COVID vaccine that may come from Israel, water irrigation policies, all sorts of things. So this is a win-win for both sides. And of course, the Israelis are happier than ever to finally have some semblance of peace with some of its neighbors in what has been an awfully, awfully tough neighborhood to live in. And I think that the future is bright for the Middle East. So kudos to all those parties involved.
Now, Lisa, before I let you go, how about an update as to the wildfire situation along the West Coast, especially in California, where you are?
Yes, as you know, how this has been a record-breaking year with regards to the number of acres that have been damaged and burnt down, the number of casualties, the families, homes, pets, animals, wild animals that have been truly destroyed by these wildfires. They continue in the north. Where I am, it's in Southern California. It's been much better. The air quality has also improved, but quite often we still hear about them. Just a few days ago, there was one right off the freeway, and you can smell it here. You can see it here on the horizon. There was no sunset. All you can see is this orange haze. And of course, this is something that we don't want to take our eyes off of. And I thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to it weekly. And this is, it's truly horrific. And I know you guys get some of that smoke in Canada, so it does travel up to your neck of the woods as well.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that smoke make its way up to British Columbia and Alberta. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, stay safe.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.